Well, hello, everybody. Welcome on this lovely Saturday afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. We'll maybe give it a minute or so to see, give folks a little bit of time maybe to also join. We've got a great group already, though, Brandon. I'm really excited. Clearly, a lot of people are excited to hear your talk. Um, Maybe to start with, I always love to learn if folks are willing to share where they're joining us from. So I can share that I am joining you all from Honouliuli this Saturday afternoon, where I was born and raised. If you just want to put it in the chat or come off of mute, love to understand where folks are joining us from. And the other information we'd love to learn is just how everybody heard about the talk. I'm trying to get the word out of our 10th anniversary and all the events that we have every month. And it's really helpful to understand kind of where folks are getting their information. So if folks are willing to share that as well, would love to, if you want to put it in the chat, would love to learn a little bit about that as well. So as folks are engaging on that, I definitely want to give Brandon as much time to share his mana'o with us as possible. So I'm just going to jump right in. So thank you again for joining us. My name is Christine Ogura. For those of you who I haven't met yet, I am the superintendent of Honouliuli National Historic Site. I'm so excited that we are joined today as part of our 10th anniversary and this month highlighting the Okinawan POWs that were held at Honouliuli. Dr. Brandon Marc Higa is a lecturer in law with a doctor of judicial sciences and Juris Doctor degrees from the University of Hawaii Manoa William S. Richardson School of Law. He received an SEP Bourne Fellowship to complete postgraduate research at Stanford University's Inter-University Center for Japanese Language Studies in Yokohama, Japan. And his undergraduate study abroad experiences have included exchanges to Waseda University as a Freeman Asia awardee and the Kunhi University through the Critical Language Scholarship, while completing dual bachelor's and master's degrees in international relations at the University in Southern California. So again, we are so pleased that Brandon can join us and can share his work with us to really educate us on the Okinawan POWs at Honouliuli and providing us that historical context to understand their situation and their status. So with that, Brandon, I will hand it over to you, and we all look forward to hearing what you're going to share with us today.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for creating this tremendous platform to discuss Okinawan prisoners of war. I really enjoyed last week's event with Professor Kaori Akiyama and hope that today's event can further expand upon her excellent points in research, especially for those of you who are spending 2 Saturdays with us. This year marks the 125th anniversary of the first immigrant from Okinawa to Hawaii. It's a particularly auspicious occasion to celebrate the start of a vibrant Uchinanchi community here in Hawaii that continues to keep a strong relationship with Okinawa and welcome community interest in Okinawa through ongoing events like these. So at that, I'm happy to start our conversation today. So again, thank you to everybody who's here for supporting Honouliuli's 10th anniversary of the park. If you came across Kara Hayashino's column in the Star Advertiser from July 15th, I'd encourage you to read about that and the significance of the park. It is really a tremendous effort of so many people to keep things alive in consciousness and in place. And by all of you being here, you're part of this really important history. So thank you so much for spending your time with us. I want to read a really quick excerpt from Carol's column because it resonated with me and inspired me as I was preparing for today's talk. So, across the islands, persons of Japanese ancestry were selectively arrested, interrogated, and imprisoned at places like Sand Island, Kilauea Military Camp, Haiku, Kalaheo, and Honouliuli, and other remote sites. They were not incarcerated in mass like those in California, Washington, and Oregon. In Hawaii, they were singled out, detained without trial, and silenced by stigma and shame. For decades, their stories remained hidden. Of Hawaii's 17 World War II confinement sites, Honouliuli was the only camp built for the sole purpose of imprisoning U.S. citizens. So efforts to preserve Honouliuli culminated 10 years ago with President Barack Obama's proclamation, of Honouliuli as a national monument to help tell this difficult story of the internment camp's impact on the Japanese American community and the fragility of civil rights during times of conflict. So Honouliuli is not just a site, it's a promise, a commitment to the memories of Okinawan POWs and Japanese American internees whose fate led them to Honouliuli. Christine and all of you are a really big part of that continuing story. So, thank you for introducing yourself in the chat and telling us where you're from. A little about me. I'm joining us today from IAEA. I am in Uchinanshu, third generation with roots in Kuba, Nakagusku. Recently went there last month and was able to visit this site at one of their significant ports where um, people were accepting folks back to Okinawa after the war. Just wanted to share that spot with all of you. My research interests are founded on the distinct history of Okinawa as a former independent kingdom. That is going to be the basis of our talk today. Today's presentation is titled From the Ryukyu Kingdom to Honouliuli, Okinawan POWs in Historical Context. The purpose of this talk is to bring together two threads that are often discussed separately: Okinawa's history as a once independent kingdom and the experiences of Okinawan prisoners of war, particularly those interned at Honouliuli in Hawaii during World War II. By exploring these histories together, I hope to show how Okinawa's pre-war status as a recently annexed colony of Japan, with deep cultural and political ties to China, shaped the way Okinawans were treated both in Japan and abroad. In Japan, Okinawans were often segregated geographically and socially, similar to the treatment of other new Japanese populations like the Ainu and Hokkaido. In Hawaii, that marginalization followed them across the ocean, where Okinawans were sometimes placed in separate plantation camps from Japanese immigrants and faced discrimination from both the dominant Japanese community and US institutions. So this presentation unfolds in three parts. First, I'll summarize the legal and geopolitical history of the Ryukyu Kingdom, including its annexation and Japanization, which laid the foundation for Okinawa's ambiguous national status going into the Pacific War. Second, we'll examine how that background shaped the internment of Okinawan POWs and how their treatment at Honouliuli differed from that of other internees. Finally, I'll close with a few reflections and questions for further exploration, including what Okinawan internment can teach us about race, empire, and legal status in wartime. So I wanted to welcome all of you to share with each other in the chat what is your or your family's earliest recollection of Okinawa? For Uchinanchu living in Hawaii and other parts of the world, when did your ancestors first immigrate here? Do you or your relatives identify as Uchinanchu, Nikkei, both, or perhaps something else? If you are Uchinanchu at heart, what is your impression of Okinawa relative to other parts of Japan and the world? Okinawa traces back more than 6 centuries ago as a Ryukyu kingdom, which maintained a tributary relationship with Ming and Qing dynasties of China for centuries. Historical records show that the Ryukyu kingdom entered into its tributary relationship with the Ming dynasty of China in 1372. This formal relationship signifies formal recognition of the Ryukyu king by the Chinese emperor. The tributary relationship served as a form of diplomacy and political maneuvering, which helped the Ryukyu kingdom navigate complex regional power dynamics. This tributary system involved ceremonial vassalage, gift exchanges, and the granting of investitures and trade permits. Japanese influence over Ryukyu started when it became a vassal of the Satsuma domain of Japan in the 17th century. This dual vassalage allowed Japan to indirectly trade with China through Ryukyu. There weren't direct relations between Japan and China at that time. Some scholars attribute Japan's seizure of the Ryukyus as marking the beginning of the end to China's tributary system, establishing a new regional order, which had broader implications for regional power dynamics in East Asia. So I wanted to share a couple of the authors that helped me learn more about this history. George Kerr, in his book Okinawa, The History of an Island People, which is like groundbreaking for its time, as well as Mamoru Akamine's The Ryukyu Kingdom, cornerstone of East Asia, and more recently, publications by Gregory Smits. So this is a mapping of the three major historical periods leading up to the Pacific War to just kind of give us a framing of where Okinawa was situated in these times. And I wanted to drill down a little bit more into its status leading up to the tributary system in the first place. So in the early dynasties from 618 to 1279, the Ryukyus maintained trade relations with China, but they weren't sending tributary missions to the country at that time. It wasn't until it wasn't until 1206 to 1368 where they started to dispatch envoys from China to attempt to subjugate the islands to be within the tributary system, and was met with concerted resistance. Then it was in the 12th century that the Ryukyu chain was divided into three independent kingdoms: Northern Ryukyus, Central Ryukyus, and Southern Ryukyus. Then later in 1368 to 1644, the China central government sent envoys to these three separate Ryukyu states and conferred honorific titles on three kings. In return, the three kingdoms promised to pay tribute to the Chinese court as vassal states. In 1429, the Central Ryukyus conquered its northern and southern parts, unifying the Ryukyu Islands into a single kingdom. So the king of Central Ryukyus was recognized as the Ryukyu king. Thereafter, the relationship between the Ryukyu kingdom and China developed harmoniously, and the islands were regarded as a role model for other tributaries. All Ryukyu kings were subject to appointment by the Ming court, with the kingdom under the title of the Chinese Emperor's Reign and lunar calendar. So all of the official documents, diplomatic treaties, and history books of the Ryukyus from that time period were written in Chinese. So I think to distill this into 3 points that I want to draw upon moving forward. Um, Okinawa's status prior to the Pacific War was that it was an independent kingdom that directly paid tribute to China through China's tributary system. It was then invaded and converted into a vassal state by Japan through Satsuma Han. During this time, Okinawa was still maintaining tributary payments to China. Then it was subsequently annexed during Japan's expansionist pursuit of new territories. So Okinawa's annexation took place over a period between 1868 to 1912, which marked a period of expansion and growth for Japan. It was accompanied by assimilation policies that were mandated. This forced Okinawans to adopt Japanese as the standard language, with accompanying customs, religion, and other aspects. There was a suppression of Ryukyuan culture and language through the use of uchinaguchi and other cultural and religious practices. To understand the experience of Okinawan POWs, we must also begin to understand the legal framework that shaped the identity of all Japanese citizens under the Meiji Constitution. This was enacted just after Okinawa's annexation around 1879. Under the 1889 Meiji Constitution, people were not considered citizens with the same constitutional rights as we understand them under the current post-war constitution. They were subjects of the emperor. So the emperor was declared as sacred and inviolable under Article 3 of the Meiji Constitution, and his authority was unrestricted during times of war or national emergency under Article 31. This meant that all Japanese subjects could be conscripted for military service, Article 20, not for the sake of individual or civic duty, but in service to the emperor. For Okinawans, this structure reinforced their status as Shin Nihonjin, or New Japanese, who were still culturally and politically marginalized both on the Japanese mainland and abroad. This legal and imperial hierarchy helps explain why Okinawans were treated differently, even among fellow Japanese subjects, and foreshadows their eventual segregation in places like Hawaii. Although Okinawans were officially recognized as Japanese citizens following their annexation in 1879, their actual legal and social status remained deeply ambiguous, especially in relation to the imperial center. They're often labeled Shin Nihonjin, or New Japanese. This is a term that implied second-tier citizenship, according to some scholars. This ambiguous status mirrored the treatment of the Ainu people in Hokkaido. So both the Ryukyu and Ainu were groups that were recently incorporated into the Japanese Empire at that time and were seen as culturally and racially distinct from the majority Yamato Japanese. This different status carried over across the Pacific. When Okinawan immigrants arrived in Hawaii in the early 1900s, they were often segregated not just from white communities, but also from mainland Japanese immigrants. Pla- Plantation records show that Okinawan workers were sometimes housed in separate camps and subjected to discrimination, even by other Japanese, who referred to them as pig eaters and questioned their Japanese identity. While Okinawans held Japanese passports, their mobility and labor were tightly controlled by both Japanese and American authorities. These tensions raise important questions about what it truly means to be a subject of the emperor and whether Okinawans were ever fully embraced within this imperial identity. So I recommend reading Kirsten Ziumek's book, Lost Histories: Recovering the Lives of Japan's Colonial Peoples, for further information on Okinawa's status during these critical time periods between 1900s and 1970s. Okinawa's role in the Pacific War was tragically distinct. As Japan's last defensive outpost before the mainland, the island became the site of one of the bloodiest battles of World War II, the Battle of Okinawa, which raged from April to June 1945. The US military referred to it as the Typhoon of Steel, reflecting the sheer intensity of the bombardment and resistance. But Okinawa's people bore the greatest cost. Historical accounts discuss the Japanese Imperial Army's use of Okinawan civilians as human shields and use of scorched earth tactics that left no refuge. Civilians were trapped between advancing US forces and retreating Japanese troops, facing starvation, bombardment, and in many cases, forced mass suicides. Estimates place the civilian death toll at 120,000, over one-third of Okinawa's pre-war population. This catastrophic loss underscored Okinawa's unique position, not only as a geographic frontline, but as a people treated as expendable by the Japanese military machine. The trauma and legacy of this battle continue to shape Okinawan identity and their relationship with both Japan and the United States. Moreover, the Meiji Constitution legitimized the forced conscription of Okinawans into military service, ultimately putting them in the front lines of battle against an insurmountable force and resulting in the mass incarceration as prisoners of war. Before I start the next section, I want to take a moment to recognize the unimaginable hardship Okinawan POWs and their families faced before, during, and after the Pacific War. Out of respect for these individuals, I would encourage everyone to share a memory of those near and dear to your family who were affected by the Battle of Okinawa, whether as someone who perished during the war, was subsequently interned, or otherwise affected. The devastation of the Battle of Okinawa was not only marked by mass civilian deaths, it also exposed the legal and systemic structures that placed Okinawans directly in harm's way. Under the Meiji Constitution, all Japanese subjects, regardless of regional identity or ethnic distinction, were subject to compulsory military service. For Okinawans, this meant conscription into an imperial war effort that often treated them as disposable both on the battlefield and beyond it. Many Okinawans were forcibly drafted or otherwise pressed into military roles, including labor battalions, support units, or frontline combat, often with little training or equipment. Others were coerced into aiding military options as non-combatants, facing the same dangers as soldiers, yet without the recognition or protection afforded to them. As the war ended and the Allied forces advanced, thousands of Okinawans, whether soldiers, auxiliaries, or civilian mistaken as combatants, were captured and detained in internment or POW camps. These experiences of captivity, like the battle itself, reveal the layered vulnerability of Okinawans. Caught between imperial command and foreign occupation, their lives were shaped by forces far beyond their control. So in this next section, we'll examine stories of Okinawan POWs, their wartime roles, conditions of captivity, and long-term impact of these experiences on Okinawan society and memory. To understand the broader legal context of wartime incarceration, it's important to look at the US government's actions following the attack on Pearl Harbor. On February 19th, 1942, President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, authorizing the creation of military exclusion zones. This paved the way for the forced removal and incarceration of more than 120,000 Japanese Americans, the majority of whom were US citizens. This was not based on individual wrongdoing, but rather on ancestry alone. Soon after, Public Law 503 was passed by Congress on March 18th, 1942. This law effectively criminalized any disobedience of military orders issued under EO 9066, further solidifying the legal foundation for mass incarceration. The War Relocation Authority, a civilian agency, was then established to manage internment camps, though it's important to note that these facilities were for civilians and were separate from military-run prisoner of war camps. Here we must draw a legal and ethical distinction. Japanese American internees were civilians detained without trial or charges. Okinawan POWs, on the other hand, were categorized as enemy combatants, many of whom were forcibly conscripted by Japan and were detained under the framework of the Geneva Conventions. This difference in legal status shaped everything from their treatment in detention to how their stories were remembered or forgotten in post-war narratives. This quote from Joyce Chinen's article resonated with me. I just want to share it with everybody. Okinawans occupied a liminal space between being Japanese and not Japanese, being American and not American, being Hawaii-born but not local. We'll unpack this a little bit further in this section. So I think from Professor Akiyama's talk last Saturday, we realized that one of the challenges in reconstructing Okinawan wartime experiences is the lack of official recognition in US records. During World War II, there was no official census designation for Okinawan internees held at Honouliuli or other wartime confinement sites. This means they were often statistically and legally grouped by Japanese internees, even though their cultural, linguistic, and historical experiences differ in important ways. But outside of government records, there is a well-established basis for treating Okinawans as a distinct population, especially in discussions of wartime captivity. This is where scholars and community advocates have long recognized the value of maintaining separate discussions regarding Okinawan POWs and Japanese POWs. This is because even before the war, Okinawans were socially and culturally segregated from other Japanese immigrants in Hawaii. On plantations, they often lived in separate camps and were subject to different forms of treatment, cultural practices, and linguistic differences. To further complicate the historical record, not all Okinawan POWs shared the same legal status, which is a critical point that's often overlooked in conventional wartime narratives. Some were Japanese citizens conscripted into the Japanese Imperial Army and captured in battle. Others were American citizens born to Okinawan immigrants in Hawaii or the US mainland, who were swept up into the chaos of war, whether as civilians caught overseas or as non-combatants misidentified as enemy nationals. So others were dual citizens, born in the US but registered in Japan's family registry system, the Koseki, which automatically conferred Japanese nationality even if they had never lived in Japan. This diversity reflects the complex transnational identity of Okinawans in the pre-war period. Many families had already established roots in Hawaii, California, Peru, or other parts of the Americas by the early 20th century, long before Okinawa became a frontline battleground in the Pacific. So when war broke out, these individuals found themselves trapped between competing national allegiances and legal classifications. Were they enemy aliens, US citizens, Japanese nationals? In many cases, the answer depended more on circumstances of war than on legal clarity. Understanding this layered citizenship is essential because it helps us move beyond just a binary view of Japanese versus American and even versus Okinawa and brings us closer to the lived reality of Okinawans whose identities were shaped by these conditions. So I have here um, different classifications of POWs. Here in Honouliuli, the Japanese internees were citizens and residents. You've got Okinawan and Japanese POWs, as well as internees from Germany, Italy, Taiwan, and Korea. Important legal distinctions are for many internees, they were held under domestic wartime exclusion laws, such as EO 9066, whereas for POWs, they were held under international law, the Geneva Conventions of 1929. And for Okinawan prisoners of war, they were officially classified as Japanese nationals, but also culturally distinct and sometimes mistrusted by both sides, the Japan and the US. This ambiguity remains over how fully the Geneva Convention protections were extended. Majority of the Okinawan POWs were non-combatants, and this was due to forced conscription. I think taking a closer look, it was surprising for me to find out in um, reading about this that there were many student conscripts, one of which was the um, former governor Masahide Ota in Okinawa, who was a longtime advocate for peace and um, prominent attorney as well. It included blood and iron loyalist troops from high school male students and Himiyuri nursing students who often were assigned to support Japanese military units. They also included skilled workers. These were enlisted personnel and non-combatants that were part of the Nanyo Project, which was comprised of managers and workers and designated Japanese POWs since these Okinawan individuals carried Japanese passports. So, a couple of points. Civilian conscription and mobilization blurred lines between combatants and non-combatants. Many Okinawans were forced into labor, nursing, and military support roles. And Okinawans were often suspected of disloyalty by Japanese forces, leading to internal persecution even before American capture. This is one of the dominant points in the discussion of the Battle of Okinawa. It's also important to note that Okinawan specific narratives are missing in the discussion of legal fights concerning internment, despite their status as a double minority. Their access to legal remedies are more complicated than those discussed by Japanese Americans based on their socioeconomic standing, as well as ambiguous legal status following World War II. Do want to note that there has been considerable work done on Japanese American internees through the Supreme Court Korematsu case, as well as Hirabayashi and Yasui. There is no similar equivalent for Okinawans regarding legal mobilization and advocacy. So as we look to the future, I know we're all here in this space and open to ways to continue this conversation and pursue research that can help us further unpack things that we learned through this virtual talk series. First, I want to say that the National Park Service virtual talk addresses the often overlooked histories of Okinawan POWs as a major part of Honouliuli's history. I again want to thank Superintendent Ogura for hosting today's event and this month-long virtual talk series. It also signals that Honouliuli is a critical site of layered memories of former internees, which includes Okinawan POWs as a distinct population therein. And Okinawan POW experiences are varied and complicated based on pre-war annexation and implications on their legal status. Some opportunities for future exploration include interdisciplinary research incorporating Indigenous studies, international and comparative law, as well as oral histories to really to drill down into people's experiences that may not be represented in um, what's currently available in text. We can also expand on mainstream representation of World War II discourse and Nisei veterans' history to distinguish the Okinawan POW experience and understand the ongoing legal ambiguities regarding Okinawa status that would not have otherwise been possible but for its annexation by Japan and resulting impacts on Okinawa during World War II. If you're interested in reading more, I've got a sample of an article that Professor Kelly Nakamura and I published a couple years ago. It's called The Hawaii Connection, Okinawa's Post-War Reconstruction and Uchinanshi Identity in the Asia Pacific Journal's Japan Focus. If you scan that QR code, you can get access to this article for free. A list of sources covered today is available here in a reading list. If there's something that you've come across in your reading and studies that you'd like me to read and familiarize myself with, please send me a note or drop a link in the chat. Okay, well, this is the end of my talk. Thank you again for spending your time with me on a Saturday. I do want to turn it over to Superintendent Ogura, who has some announcements. Thank you.
Yeah, well, actually, before I do that, I think we want to make sure we have an opportunity for folks to ask some questions. There's so much wonderful information that you shared with us today, and I already see some questions coming through the chat. So, folks are welcome to either put your questions in the chat, or if you want to come off camera or audio, you're welcome to do that as well. But I know because you're presenting, you didn't get a chance to see some of the responses in the chats about your question. But Daryl Higa shared that his parents came over, his grandparents immigrated both sets to Hawaii in the 1910s to work in the plantation camps, and his parents were born in Hawaii. Burns talks about his mother's parents immigrating from Haneji Village in 1907. And some other relatives that came over were settled in the Okinawan camps at Wahiawa and Kauai, and worked for the McBride Sugar Company as well. So some of the responses coming in from your question at the beginning of your talk of what folks' first experiences were or memories of Okinawa. Just sharing that with you. And then, yeah,
Thank you.
we have several questions already, so we're just going to jump right in. So, what the first question from Phil is: can you compare treatment of Okinawan POWs to treatment of Korean and Taiwanese POWs?
Thank you, Phil, for that question. I'm not like deeply versed in the treatment of Korean and Taiwanese POWs, but that is definitely something I look forward to learning more about. If you have any particular sources or histories that you'd like to call my attention to, I'd love to hear them.
Phil, what I can share with you actually, early plug for our August events is actually we are continuing the theme of POWs at Honouliuli because that is a really not well known story about who was held at Honouliuli. It was predominantly a prisoner of war camp. And so August is when we're actually going to be featuring the Korean POW stories. And the park has funded a professor at the University of Hawaii to do oral histories. So she is going to be our feature speaker to talk about the Korean POW. So that information is all on our website and you can register for her talk. But that is a great question to ask her if you're able to join us for that talk as well. And so I think Phil's second question was, were Ainu also drafted and how were they treated as POWs?
As POWs. Thank you, Phil. That's a great question. I've got a separate reading list that I can share with you that covers this Ainu experience. I know there was a significant history written about Ezo. This is the term I think for Hokkaido prior to colonization. Ezo's role in providing materials and other things for Japan's wars and expansion during that time. In terms of their POWs, my readings didn't go too much into their specific treatment, but again, if there's things that you'd like to call my attention to, happy to check those out.
Mhm. And I do see David's hand up. David, if that was a question or if you had a response to any of these questions as well, let me unmute you. Or maybe I can ask, let's see, Wes to help me unmute you. I'm just scrolling up to find you, David, so I can do that. I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself.
Okay.
David, I
There
unmuted
you go.
you.
Okay. Um, Mark, great job, Christine. Thank you. The Okinawan community, at least in Waipahu, were able to connect with the Okinawan POWs at Honouliuli. Did you hear about those stories? Okay. There's a woman that's living right now. Her name is Fumie Oshiro. She is the grandmother of Brandon Ing, Brandon Gusku Ing. She's a auntie of my wife, and they lived in Waipahu. She's about 90, almost mid 90s. She's still living. What they did was the military had the POWs, at least the Okinawan POWs, I don't know about the Japanese POWs, do public works projects in Waipahu. So they were doing things under the roadways. They were, digging ditches. They were doing those kind of things. And it started with the Okinawan families giving them bentos. The I don't know if you guys probably heard about that, but the Okinawan families would give bentos to the Okinawan POWs, and then it progressed, and the Okinawan community would take photographs with them, and then it got to the point where the guards would allow the POWs at lunchtime to go into the homes of the Okinawan residents in Waipahu and have lunch, sit down lunch with them. So you might want to check. I think those stories are at JCCH and are also at HUOA. And there was that event, or there was that pilgrimage, the Ire Sai, I, yeah, Irei Sai. It was in 2018, I think, when some of those POWs actually came back to visit. Okinawan POWs came back to visit Honouliuli, and Brandon Ing actually played Sanshin for them at Honouliuli, and his grandmother got to meet them. So anyway, that's a story you might want to look into. That's an interesting story. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Arakasan.
I think that might have answered Rhonda your question. She asked, how did the local Okinawans treat the Okinawan POWs? And I think Sherry also shared some of that information as well. Sherry shares that relatives and friends would go over to give items to Okinawan POWs, and Kamisaki Kakazu gave his relatives his sanshin, so he could they could have some music. And then David, you added additional information in there as well. Stories about Japanese troops on the island of Kumejima that didn't know the war ended. And they hid in the wilderness and murdered Kumejima residents who they felt were cooperating with the U.S. troops. Yeah, I had, the park has a book called Breaking the Silence. It was actually edited by UH West Oahu professors that had various aspects of history and research done about the folks in the history at Honolulu. And then one of the chapters that Joyce Chinnen actually wrote did talk about exactly what David, you had shared, and Sherry as well, in terms of it got to the point where the camp commander was concerned about people escaping. There was just so much interaction with the local Okinawans because the Okinawan POWs did have relatives in the community already because of the sugar plantation days. And there was just so much interaction that there was just a security concern. So Joyce Chinnen in her chapter did also share some of that history as well. Are there other questions for Brandon from his talk? Hello from Atlanta. My goodness, wow. Hapani Homekamaina, I love it. Had a family member interned at Honouliuli. Oh, okay. And in the 150th, engineering battalion. Great. Well, thank you for letting us know. if you're willing to share more, I do try my best to keep in touch with descendants and also have conversations. So would love to follow up with you more. I think, the interesting topic for me about the Okinawan POWs is that they do hold a unique place too at the camp, in that Okinawans were represented both on the POW and the civilian side. Were very similar. They were kind of jumped into the uh, just they were put into the same category as Japanese. And so it was really hard in terms of understanding kind of that nuanced layer of who was Okinawan American as well as Japanese American on the civilian side as well, because they were kind of lumped together. So it's interesting also that I learned from your presentation, Brandon, that there was similar confusion on the POW side. So let
Cool.
Yeah. So if we don't have any other, oh, hi, Cody. What was your implication regarding Okinawan double minority theory, which you skipped?
Thanks for that question, Professor Akiyama. So in reading Professor Chinen's article, she raises a really important point about just this double minority. For Okinawans, their status as a minority within Japan, but also a minority within a minority here on the plantation. So it's just this space where we can't just think in terms of like Okinawans were Japanese technically because of annexation at that time. Therefore, it was, simple to categorize them for the purposes of the interment. Um, that there were those further nuances, not only socially, which is covered often in recollection of plantation communities, but also for the purposes of um, POWs and Okinawan status during and after the war. So thank you for that excellent question.
So again, this is an area where the park definitely wants to continue to do more research to understand this history. And David, I appreciated you. We are working with HUOA and some other organizations to continue to understand this history, kind of where are the pockets of information. Brandon, you did a great job of identifying future areas of explanation or exploration. And so I think there's a lot still to be uncovered, a lot still to learn. And we definitely look forward to working with a lot of folks in the Okinawan community to really understand that history on both sides of the people that were incarcerated at Honouliuli. So you've really just talked. Can you talk about how the Hawaii Okinawan community can assist the Park Service with identifying Okinawans? Yes, thank you for that question, Sherry. So Sherry was asking how the local Okinawan community can assist the Park Service with identifying Okinawans at Honouliuli. So David, you had mentioned that there might be these records at HUOA. So certainly that's one area. Certainly looking at the UH library as well for some of this history. The park does have an archaeologist, and I'm going to do an early plug. If you want to volunteer with the park, he is heading up kind of our research needs for the park, and he's working on a gap assessment in terms of what research has been done for the history of the camp and where we need to do more investment, where we need to learn more, where are those kind of future areas for exploring, as Brandon had ended his talk with. And so, the park is only myself and a biotechnician and an archaeologist, and there's just so much work to be uncovered still. And so I think partnering with folks like Brandon and Kelly and Sherry, Cody, definitely working with Joyce Chinen, who's, as you know, in the Okinawan communities, is a well-known scholar as well, and HUOA. We are looking for more partners to help us uncover this work. So Sherry, going back to your question, again, trying to find these pockets of information, what David shared, where would you find this so we can help illuminate these stories? Oral histories are a big effort that the park is really looking into. The park does have some oral histories with Okinawan POWs, as you heard from Kaori's talk last Saturday. And so that's work that we're trying to get that published and on the park's website. So we're really looking for people who want to volunteer to help us with oral histories, to speak with folks like Ifumi Oshiro that David brought to our attention. So there is a whole bunch of needs. I see Lynn's on the talk today, and I don't want to embarrass her, but she has been helping the park as well with our outreach events. We're going to have a table, one of the previews for August events at the Okinawa Festival. So it's also helping us with these types of events to do outreach and education to educate our local community about this history here at Honouliuli and how it ties to the Okinawan community. So yeah, there is a lot of ways that folks can, the local Okinawan community can help engage and, reach out to myself. My contact information is on the website, and we're hoping to launch formally our volunteer program to be able to share some of these needs, that if folks are interested, they can help us with that. And certainly looking to include more partners. Again, folks like Brandon and scholars have been really helpful. HUOA has been wonderful partners to identify how we can work together to continue to preserve this important history at Honouliuli. So mahalo from, Sandra sharing how my mother and auntie so they could listen as well. Yes. So this is being recorded. So we do try to get these up in a couple weeks after the talk. So if your mother and auntie couldn't log in or was having problems. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Definitely we do keep track of numbers to share how important these speaker series are for folks. Question to me, what is the status of Honouliuli restoration? Yeah, thank you so much for asking, Rhonda. So the reason why folks can't go to Honouliuli at the moment is because unfortunately the Park Service does not own any lands that connect us to a public roadway. So unlike my sister park, Pearl Harbor, people just can't drive up. I have to traverse other people's lands to actually even get to the park. So I am working with UH Westerwaku, they're the landowner for one side of the park, to be able to provide access to our communities and school groups to be able to start limited public tours. And the goal is that we are going to be able to offer that January 2026. We're just working out some logistics, but that is the goal. And the best way to keep updated on that is, again, go to the park's website. If you do social media, we have a Facebook and Instagram account, and that's definitely how we'll be sharing when that opportunity will become available. Let's see, have their East Coast Factory, King's Hawaiian, also Chinoku, Large American Society. Your paternal grandpa was in the Battle of Okinawa. Wow, Greg. Yes, we should definitely talk. Untold story. Yes, thank you for sharing that, Daryl. Actually, that's a great early plug as well for some August events. And I'll just share some of that right now as well. So August, we have a whole lot of events. I talked about our virtual speakers that will be talking about the Korean POWs. We're also going to have a table at the Korean Festival as well. But one of the documentaries on Japanese American incarceration here local in Hawaii, and it's not just at Honouliuli, there are incarceration sites throughout Hawaii and all the neighbor islands. So we are offering through Pacific Historic Parks, which is the park's partner and nonprofit, which hosts this virtual speaker series, but is also hosting a series of these documentaries being featured at the Doris Duke Theater at the Honolulu Museum of Art. And we are able to offer that free because PHP is sponsoring everybody's tickets. So you don't have to pay, and you can actually see these documentaries for free. So that is in August as well. And you can register for those tickets free, but you do still need to register to get your tickets on our park website as well. The other event, I already talked about the Okinawan Festival. We do have a pop-up exhibit at the Central Pacific Bank offices or main headquarters in downtown for Honouliuli that has more information. And then we also have a special tour of Konkon Mission, which is where the Reverend Haruko Takahashi was incarcerated at Honouliuli, and they are offering special tours of her mission that she started as well in August. So there are the other virtual speaker that I should mention that's a little unusual in the sense that we focus a lot on the Japanese and Okinawan Americans, but there are actually Italian and German Americans held in Honouliuli Honouliuli as well. So we do have one of our virtual speakers, Dr. Alan Rosenfeld, also with the University of Hawaii, who looked into this unknown part of Honouliuli and those who are incarcerated there. So he's also one of our speakers for August as well. So yes, I think Rhonda, that's what I was mentioning. Sorry if I wasn't clear. Yes, so we are going to be doing tours to Honouliuli starting in January. That's the goal. Again, we don't do that. It's not the park is not open for tours for the public to come to because the Park Service doesn't own any lands that connect us to a public roadway. So people just can't drive up to go to the park. It's landlocked with other landowners owning the land to access the park. So yes, Rhonda, sorry if I wasn't clear about what I was sharing, but yes, we are going to start up limited public tours. The goal is January of 2026 to be able to take people to the park, as well as school groups really want to focus on youth and education as well. Let's see, just want to make sure I'm not missing any questions or anything in the chat before I maybe start closing. If folks don't have any more questions for, yes, so Daryl, yes. We don't have a email group newsletter or anything like that, unfortunately. But the way you can learn about it is, again, if you go to the park's website, we do have a plan your visit section. But if you do social media, you can sign up for the Facebook and the Instagram account that's on the park's website. If you scroll to the bottom as well, that's another way we'll get the news out. But if you want to share your email, I'm more than happy to start putting a list together for notification. We don't have one right now, but certainly happy to share with you as well. But yeah, I mean, we will hopefully clearly do a news release, and hopefully the local media will help us spread the word too. But the best way to do it, if you have social media, is just follow us on our Facebook or Instagram, or visit back to the park's website, and that's kind of what we would do. Yes, definitely would send it out to all our partners who've done a wonderful job of getting all our events out this year to your communities. So definitely we'll be letting all our partners know to help spread the word as well. So thank you, Rhonda. Yeah. So if we have any other questions for either myself or Brandon, definitely want to make sure that we get through that. And keep me honest, I haven't missed anything in the chat that we weren't able to get to or weren't able to answer.
Thank you for addressing all those questions. Arakawa-san brought up a question: how were Okinawan POWs treated differently at Honouliuli? I'm not sure if I had a chance to address this.
Sure.
So let me know if I got this right. The main difference was that the POWs were classified as POWs and not civilians. And that classification may not have always been like so clear for Okinawans. So civilians had access to better amenities such as hot showers and toilets that were able to flush, which was a really big infrastructural thing for that time. Whereas POWs lived in tents, they had cold showers and used the bathroom in pit latrines. So is that something that's confirmed in what's preserved at the park?
Correct. Yeah. And I think, again, Breaking the Silence is the book that also talks about those differences as well.
And then Arakawa-san's follow-up is a difference between Okinawan POWs and Japanese POWs.
Yeah, I'm not sure if maybe Kaori might know, is able to respond to that. I do know that they were segregated. They were not lumped together. So I know that they were segregated and put separately.
Recall reading just a little bit about visitations, and I'm glad that Arakawa-san mentioned that some of the Okinawan POWs were allowed to go out of the camp and eat with local families. I'm not sure if the same was happening with Japanese POWs, but it seemed like family visitation may have been longer. So that's something that I will read further into and clarify.
Yeah, it would be interesting in seeing the differences in treatment and privileges. Yeah. again, another area where we welcome partners and volunteers to help us. There's so many more questions than there are answers that it's, yeah, I mean, really, there's just still so much to learn, even though there's been really great scholarly work done about the history at the camp. There's just so much more that, we have no idea what happened there.
Yes. And Professor Akiyama raised a really important distinction to answer Arakawa-san's question about the difference
Mm.
between Japanese POWs and Okinawan POWs. So Okinawan POWs were generally kept in Hawaii at sites like Honouliuli. They weren't sent to the mainland on the US, except they were younger and older than 45 years old. Whereas for Japanese POWs, many of them were sent out of the islands. And I do recall reading that um, the camps here in Hawaii were sort of like processing hubs before the Japanese POWs were sent to the larger camps on the continent.
Yeah. Daryl asked, and maybe this is something Kaori can also respond to, because I remember you did talk about this in your talk, Kaori. But Daryl was asking what level of involvement, if any, does the Okinawan government libraries have about this segment of the Okinawan population? And I do recollect that Kaori from her talk showed the primary documents that she'd shared to get her information. It did seem like the Okinawan government, does have information about the POWs that were held at Honouliuli. But if I'm incorrect on that, please set me straight, Kaori. Okay, I think, yeah, she'd share. What was I doing? Yeah, I don't know about the remains. One of the things that I need to educate myself on. So, uh, Honolulu was not the only POW camp in Hawaii at the time. There's actually 12 others. Majority of them were on Oahu, and the other two were on the Big Island, I believe. But yeah, that's some of the other kind of other opportunities for more research. Is I myself haven't had the opportunity to understand who else was held in the other POW camps in Hawaii during the time. I guess it's certainly there were Japanese and Okinawans in the other camps as well. So again, another kind of area of exploration just for the larger local Okinawan community here about some of the other POW sites that were in the territory of Hawaii at the time. So Shirley asked, did Okinawans self-identify themselves and thereby segregated accordingly?
That's a really good question. I'm not, so my general sense, just based on some research looking into family immigration to Hawaii, was that according to the kinds of companies that the Okinawans would work for, that may have naturally put them into certain communities and um, plantation areas. That's at least like the impression that I got in what I heard.
Yeah, when I talk about civilians, Phil, I'm talking about the U.S. citizens and the residents.
Let's see. So Daryl asked, what level of involvement, if any, does the Okinawan government, such as its libraries, have about the Okinawan POWs? And my impression from Professor Akiyama's talk last week was that the Okinawa prefecture, through its libraries and different agencies, has taken a really concerted effort in preserving information. And the firsthand research that Kaori shared, a lot of it is accessible in Japanese and probably in physical copy only, um, are confirmation that the Okinawan government is taking very seriously preserving history of Okinawan POWs.
Well, as you can see, Brandon, your talk has generated some wonderful conversation and a lot for us to continue to explore and think about. Again, I would welcome everybody to continue to be involved in the park. we have all our information on the website, continue to learn where we're going with this history. Certainly join the team to help preserve this important history as well. Whether it's just educating your fellow friends or families, joining us as a volunteer, there are many ways to help us continue to preserve this history and understand better the Okinawan connection to Honouliuli. So with that, I want to just thank Brandon again for a wonderful talk. Thank all of you for joining on a Saturday afternoon, no less. We had a wonderful crowd, great conversation, and I hope to meet many of you in person at the Okinawan Festival. I think Brandon's going to be there as well. So we'll look forward to meeting hopefully some of you at the Okinawan Festival. And thank you all for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of the weekend. And we hope to see you in August for some of our other virtual speakers as we continue the theme of understanding the prisoners of war held at Honouliuli. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you so much.